Good morning, everybody. It's a great opportunity to have to speak to you today, and I guess we're all looking forward to 2021 and hoping that it's going to be a better year. My feeling is that it's actually going to be more of the same, and I think that's going to be an issue. I have to look down and read some notes here, so I'll be looking down and up. And there's two features of more of the same that I want to look at. And something that's characterized the last year is fear. And we see that with fear of the COVID. But look, there's been fear coming for a long time. You know, there's fear of climate change, there's fear of economic collapse, there's now fear of loss of jobs, there's fear of political instability and fear of terror attacks, to only name a few. Our world is characterized by fear. Now, fortunately, Australia's been only slightly touched by these things, particularly the COVID. But even in Australia, fear is predominant. Even governments, look at the reaction of the South Australian government to one unaccounted for case a couple of weeks ago. Shut the whole state automatically for 2 days and found out that it was actually somebody lied about getting the case. So it's even at the government level. And fear has consequences. You know, suicide rates in Australia have gone up from 3,000 to 4,500 last year, with the vast majority of them being amongst young people. Mental health issues are projected to increase by 30% across the population. And the reason is you can't live in fear and not be affected. Fear leads to anxiety and stress, and if you live with those things long enough, it will make you sick physically and mentally, and eventually affect your spiritual life. And you see, the thing is, our job as Christians is to present, or you say represent, Jesus to a lost and dying world. But if you're living in fear, anxiety, stress yourself, then that stifles the creativity and freedom that the Holy Spirit wants to bring into your life so that you can fulfill the Great Commission as you live out your daily life. So that's the first thing I just want to speak on. The second thing is that the church over the last year, but this has been coming for a while, has gradually been silenced. And I'm not just talking about wearing a mask when you try to sing in church. It's more than that. A couple of months ago, Mark interviewed me about a new direction for the church, and I've been having an unfolding vision, if you like, or installments from the Lord since 1993 about what was happening to the church and what would happen to the church. And the third installment I had of that just before COVID was that effectively the church had been pushed out of the public square, and the vision of the church I had was it was a fire burning in a bounded field, which was its normal societal impact. But outside it was hardly any expression of the church. Only small fires had crept out under the fence and started to burn brightly, and they were impacting society. But since then, I've had a fourth installment, and in that installment, even the area where the church was impacting, it's burning brightly in its own area, all I could see was a smouldering remnant. It had been almost completely stamped out. And I think there is this, and what I've taken this is, there has been a move away from the Judeo-Christian roots of our society. You know, something that has helped us develop one of the freest, open, most diverse cultures, or the most free, open, diverse cultures with the longest lifespans, the most widest spread of wealth that's ever existed. But all those things are under attack, and the values that supported the Judeo-Christian West, which are values that are biblical, are going to be further and further attacked going forward. And you can think, well, how does this sort of thing happen? It has, let me give you an example. A couple of years ago, the Archbishop of Hobart wrote a pamphlet on what the Catholic Church believes about marriage. Now, it was a very orthodox, biblically orthodox piece that we could all agree with. Didn't attack anybody, didn't try and pull anybody down. It tried to just put what we as Christians believe. He was dragged up before the Human Rights Commission in Tasmania because people came out and said it was hate speech. The Bible is not hate speech. The Bible talks about righteousness and truth. So there's some, I think, some pretty tough things ahead, and I think it's probably going to come sooner than I thought previously. But you may be thinking, well, what can the church do about this? Before you ask yourself that question, you should ask yourself this question. What can I do to counter those issues? And you see, this has got to come from the whole church. It's not just the pastors' jobs. They're already doing the heavy lifting. Everybody needs to rise up as warriors. That is my word for this year. You need to be a warrior. And a warrior is one ready to fight. They're informed, they're courageous. But there's some basic foundations to being a warrior. And these are incredibly important, and you can't achieve anything without them. The first is you need to have a deeply intimate relationship with God. Number 2, you need to press into God for the supernatural to be a normal part of your daily life. And the third thing is you actually need to understand that you are in a war. Now, being deeply intimate with God means personally hearing his voice as he speaks into your life on a daily basis. Kath and I pray together every day. We do spiritual warfare as part of our prayer time, but we always start off with, Lord, let us speak words of life and be led by the Holy Spirit today. We are saying to God, we say to God every day, we need your words of life spoken into our hearts, and those things are the things that become words of life to others. That's so important. And if you don't hear the Lord's voice regularly, you become vulnerable to the world, to fear, to confusion. Do you want to have the peace that Jesus talked about in John 14:27? Peace I leave with you, my peace I give you. I do not give to you as the world gives. Do not let your hearts be troubled, and do not be afraid. Listen, peace is not a thing or a state of mind. It is not simply the absence of disturbing circumstances. In fact, the peace that Jesus is talking about is peace in the midst of disturbing circumstances. Peace is a person. Peace is Jesus himself. Isaiah 9:6, one of his names is the Prince of Peace. And when he's speaking to you on a daily basis, you will have peace, because he who is peace is so intimately connected in your life, in your thoughts, in your walk, that his peace pervades whatever you're doing. And we need that, because that's where real life change comes from. Years ago, when we were teaching in the Life and Aid Bible schools, one of the first topics covered was hearing God's voice. Because when people could consistently hear God's voice, they were changed, they were empowered. It was life, it was the abundant life became a reality in their lives. And I always love teaching on that, and you see people really transformed in their walk. The second thing about being a warrior is living in the supernatural. Now, Kath and I have seen lots of miraculous stuff over the years. And I've shared lots of stories at Hunter over the years about God moving supernaturally. And if you're going to do that, if you're going to be a warrior, you actually need to move in the supernatural regularly. And the only way to do that is to make it a priority in your life. You need to be praying every day, Lord, today manifest your power through me to help somebody. Because if you really want to help people, you really want to help them, you will give them words of life, because that changes their whole eternity. And it's interesting, I have taught on allowing the Holy Spirit to manifest his power in our lives. I've been teaching that for decades now, for over 3 decades. And it's closer to 4 decades now. It's a theme I keep coming back to, because it's such a foundational, fundamental part of our life as Christians. Relationship with God is a supernatural event. It's not rational, it's transrational. And we need to understand that. And look, one thing I have noticed, it's easy for people to sort of slip away and think, oh, just be normal in my life. But do you know what that means? To not be spirit-filled. You were designed to carry the Holy Spirit with you in every part of your life, and to see his manifest power flow through. And if the Holy Spirit is not a priority, then whatever we do is just good works. Look, Paul said in this, 1 Corinthians 4:20, and my speech and my preaching were not with enticing words of man's wisdom, but in demonstration of the Spirit and of power. And if you eliminate that power from Christianity, all you have left is good works, acts of mercy, which is fine. But the thing is, there's secular organisations out there doing great work in that same space. But in reality, all they're doing is making people comfortable on the way to an eternity without Jesus. Only we have the words of life. And listen, words of life are empowered by the Holy Spirit. That's why Kath and I have pushed in, and we are going to do more and more of that this year, push in on seeking the power of God being manifest in our lives. And the third thing we need to know is we're actually involved in a war. It's not a war against people. even if people are used by the evil one to accomplish his plans. But let me be blunt. If you live in fear, then you're a pawn in his game. It's really that simple. You live in fear, you don't make good decisions. You live in fear, it impacts on your relationships. It destroys your dreams. In Ephesians 6:10, finally, be strong in the Lord and in his mighty power. Put on the full armour of God so that you can take your stand against the evil schemes. For our struggle is not against flesh and blood, but against the rulers, against the authorities, against the powers of this dark world, and against the spiritual forces of evil in the heavenly realms. Therefore, put on the full armour of God so that when the day of evil comes, you may be able to stand your ground, and after you've done everything, to stand. Colossians 2:15. And having disarmed the principalities and powers, he made a public spectacle of them, triumphing over them by the cross. So in Ephesians we can see that we are in a battle, and we're to stand our ground after we have done everything. And done everything is prayer, is really taking the fight to the evil one through the power of the Holy Spirit. But Colossians 2:15 says that Jesus has already pushed the fight in our favour by disarming the powers. What does it say? What it does not say is that those powers no longer exist. The devil suffered a tremendous defeat on the cross, but he is still active in the world, and he will be till the final return of the Lord. Now, I have seen demonic activity all over the world, but in fact I saw more in Lancashire than I did in Africa. But it's interesting, the Africans understand that there is a true spiritual world that is actually more important than the physical world that we live in. Westerners think the opposite. And that's because, well, let me explain like this. There was a book written a number of years ago called Why Bad Things Happen to Good People. It sold quite well in the West. Didn't make any sales outside the West really. Why? Because the Africans and people from other non-Western countries understand that John 10:10 is not a metaphor. The thief comes to kill, steal, and destroy. That there is real evil. There is a world system that wants to, if it can't kill you physically, but they are happy to, and this year 180,000 Christians will be killed because of their faith worldwide. Currently, Christians are the most persecuted group on the planet by a fair margin. But even if you can't be killed physically, your dreams can be killed, your relationships can be killed, your aspirations can be killed. Your future can be stolen from you. So that even if you make heaven, you are battered, bruised, and filled with regret. Friends, John 10:10 is not a metaphor. Now, the good news about this is the world is filled with fear, it's filled with confusion, it's in a terrible mess. And to me, that's an opportunity. If there is ever a time for the word of life to be proclaimed, it's now. I think there is a harvest. There is a harvest. And we need to rise up. warriors will accomplish this. So that's my word for this year. We need to be warriors. We need to be more intimate with God than we have ever been before. We need to push into Him for His manifest power to be released in our life and through us to help others. And thirdly, we have to recognize that we are in a war. When bad things happen, people blame God. My friends, nobody in Africa is blaming God for bad stuff because they know where it comes from. They know about spiritual warfare. Why do you think that the church growth in sub-Saharan Africa is the greatest in the world? There's more people becoming Christians than are being born every day in southern Africa, amongst even persecution that's going on. Because in their heart of hearts they all know they're warriors, that they all know they're in a war. Bless you this morning.